Today's webcast is going to focus on the SEC's XBRL mandate in automated external financial statement reporting. The product demonstration you will see is IBM's Cognos financial statement reporting application, also oftentimes referred to as Cognos FSR or simply FSR. A couple items to get out of the way very quickly. One being the agenda is that we're going to go over and discuss the SEC's XBRL mandate. Afterwards, I'm going to further discuss additional issues within the process leading up to and beyond the SEC's XBRL mandate. Going to furthermore discuss the solution for the SEC's XBRL mandate and additional issues within the process. And notice that is a singular solution. There will be a product demonstration today. Throughout the product demonstration, I'll be discussing the benefits of the solution, as well as discussing some of those benefits after the product demonstration has taken place. Secondarily, I did want to highlight here for you that you do have a live chat panel box. Please make use of that. You can send questions directly to myself throughout the presentation. I will reserve some time at the end of the presentation to address your questions. I'll be able to quickly summarize your comments as well as the questions and put those out to the wider audience, and I look to and expect to be able to answer all of your questions. So let's take a look at the timeline for the SEC's XBRL mandate. Here we can see that it is well underway, and the idea is that depending where you are and depending on the size of your organization, the XBRL mandate may have had a different timeline for you. Regardless of where your timeline has brought you, and your organization for that matter has brought you, the idea is that the mandate is really one and the same. There are a number of phases specifically, and the first phase typically deals with detailed tagging of your financial statements. There's also a block tagging exercise of the notes and schedules, and the liabilities are as furnished. As you enter into your second year of the wave or of the timeline for the SEC's XBRL mandate, you are still required to bring forward all of your detail and block tagging notes and schedules. However, the liability now becomes as filed, and we'll discuss what that perhaps means for you and what that means for your organization upcoming here in our session today. So automation everywhere but the last mile of financial reporting. This pretty much paints a picture of what your organization, generally speaking of course, has invested in, whether it be time, resources, and technology, for certain items such as planning and modeling, budgeting and forecasting, consolidation and reporting. However, as part of the last mile where you find yourselves in the XBRL mandate dealing with specifically, when it comes to creating some of the most highly visible, highly sensitive documents that your organization will ever produce, highly scrutinized as well I might add, such as, and doesn't limit you to, but definitely includes 10K documents, 10Q documents, MD&As, annual reports, earnings releases, and call scripts. Very often what we're finding is that manual processes dominate the last mile. Most organizations are spending more time preparing the reports than actually analyzing them. Now we add on an additional layer of complexity and an additional layer or task as it relates to your time, which is XBRL and the mandate from the SEC. So let's discuss a few additional and common issues and pain points leading up to, and really that's still a part and parcel of the mandate. And this will continue even after the mandate and even after you've continued to deal with XBRL for a number of quarters, a number of filings, and a number of years. These issues are related to the number of contributors you have, the number of reviewers, approvers, document managers, and report consumers. They're normally and quite often using a very familiar tool set, which is Microsoft Office suite of products. Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, may also be utilizing Outlook for email communication, perhaps also using Adobe files for supporting documentation in the forms of PDF as an example, outside of the Microsoft family obviously. The idea is that by utilizing these tools and only these tools, there are a number of inefficiencies that are brought to the table. And these are inefficiencies that, if are simply not dealt with as part of the XBRL process, will just simply make that more of a challenge and continue to be a challenge. So let me highlight a few of these here for you. The first would just simply be the informal data collection and repetitive manual data entry to and from multiple locations. Secondarily, you might have similar information presented in multiple reports. There's an awkward workflow process, if a workflow process even exists within your organization today. Version control is quite challenging, report status tracking is often difficult, and there's no true detailed audit trails of user activities. Well, what does this result in then? It results in limited analysis due to long report creation cycle times, risk of errors which limits the confidence in analysis, and last-minute updates cannot be integrated. Add on to this a substantial decrease in the time available, or perhaps even explanation to your board or to your senior level executives as to perhaps why you have to have an additional pencils down time period, whereas you need to cut off any last-minute updates. You just simply can't get them into the report due to XBRL. And I'm going to further discuss that a little bit more here as we move forward. So why is Cognos FSR and report automation important? Well, your company is under a pressure, like many others, to electronically file and deliver financial statements to local financial regulatory agencies. In this case, the SEC is going to be our focus today. There is a need for quality assurance in the financial results, and nothing less than 100% accuracy in all filings is acceptable. You can take a look at our second timeline here of the day, and effectively XBRL and the specification was announced going back almost basically a decade and a half, or just over a decade now, and that has substantially grown in different areas of the world. And it came to the SEC, it came to and was approved specifically basically going to market around 2009. There was a voluntary program that the SEC did establish going back to 2005, but effectively the majority of organizations would have to start dealing with this in the time frame of 2009 and moving forward. Now, the events and the regulations keep on getting increased. The time allowed for you to continue to file your reports on time never really gets extended. So quite oftentimes what we're seeing organizations do, especially in these times, is turn to technology to help with report automation and to be able to bring in-house at the appropriate time their own XBRL tagging and taxonomy management. Now, experts agree in the manual reporting processes do contain risks, and many of these risks carry over into XBRL. Some of these risks include just simple errors, fraud, overdependence, incorrect interpretation, lack of enterprise interoperability, lack of accuracy, lack of productivity, and a risk of compliance. Some of the outcomes also include financial loss, legal challenges, loss of stock value, loss of reputation, fines and penalties, and job loss perhaps. Here's a quote from one of the leading audit firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which stated in 2011, "From our work in the current year, we established that 95% of the Excel spreadsheets examined had errors, out of which 80% had significant monetary errors. The example being spreadsheet gives an incorrect result. This is going to have an impact on your XBRL filing. There are many things that need to be in order and many things as part of the process that need to be in place to be able to and be the best adequately able to address the XBRL mandate." And it's quite simply not too late if you have chosen to not address some of these areas before actually entering into your XBRL requirements and filings. So the solution here is Cognos FSR, and this is a solution for XBRL and report process automation. The solution itself leverages quite heavily and extensively, to a degree, Microsoft Office, where users are still going to be able to create their reports. You would still be able to create your report utilizing familiar tools in the tool sets that you have available today. Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, you might be utilizing PowerPoint, creating your different charts and graphs, all of that information which will then need to further afterwards be repurposed into XBRL format. Now Cognos FSR is going to act as the central repository that will do that repurposing for you regardless of what output you actually require, XBRL or simply for internal reporting, in terms of getting your Qs and Ks all set forth, ready to be sent out and ready to be filed. This actually also includes your Edgar filings too, I might add. So here what we have is we have Cognos FSR as an application driving all of your information from a central secure database. You are, again, as I mentioned, is going to leverage the tools already in use, Microsoft Word and Excel, but that is not the only tools that you can bring forward. Now when it comes to data collection, we recognize that much of your information is not always going to simply just be in Excel. There is going to be a certain degree and volume of information that is in Excel, but also your organization, as mentioned earlier on, has very likely invested in some additional technologies around consolidations. There may be an ERP in place, you might have a multi-dimensional database, or you might simply have a data warehouse in combinations of all of those. The idea here is that Cognos FSR can integrate with all of those, regardless of data source, providing you direct access to source data, allowing you to see your changes dynamically be updated in your reports, regardless of format for output that you've chosen, and it's all going to be updated in real time, including your XBRL filings. And I'm going to discuss some of the additional benefits with you as it relates to XBRL here, just upcoming. Now when it comes down to the collaboration, the editing, and the approvals, Cognos FSR is also going to provide for you a very powerful multi-author collaborative environment. There is going to be specific workflow that you can utilize and task management built into the solution as well, so that all of your reviewers, all of your contributors, all of your document managers, your XBRL taggers or taxonomy managers can all be in the system literally at the exact same time without stepping on one another's toes, doing what they need to do, and you're able to manage that process. Now, what you can also begin to start to embed are additional controls, whereas you may have specific checklists incorporated as it relates to XBRL, as it relates to your external or internal auditors, as it relates to specifically just a step-by-step process flow that you would like followed to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row essentially. There's going to be additional business rules that you can take advantage of to give yourself a higher level of confidence in your report outputs and in your XBRL filing at the same time too. I'll discuss further how those business rules save a large degree of time, many hours and many days each quarter, whereas we're removing a lot of the mechanical tasks that you or your team are specifically going through. And I'll give some more examples as we move forward here as well. Now security, as mentioned, is going to be part of the solution where you can have additional filters or limitations on users as to specific pages or tasks, areas of the report that you would like them to be able to see and areas you would like for them not to be able to see. And when it comes down to the actual report, as mentioned, there's going to be report consumers. And this is where your reports are going to be scrutinized both internally and externally. Cognos FSR supports multiple output formats, Excel, PowerPoint, Word, all coming from a single source of information, but the output formats don't stop there. Additional formats for you, which I'll discuss just in a little bit, but discussing some of the additional efficiencies or continuing down that path for a brief moment, is that you have the ability with Cognos FSR to make use of web templates to automate data collection from any of your data contributors anywhere in the world. You'll also be able to create and update content once and automatically update that content across multiple reports in multiple formats all simultaneously. Workflow and task management tools will provide you with greater visibility every step of the process. Now, the business insight that will be provided and will be created will increase time for analysis through reduced data collection cycle times. You're going to be able to pay more attention and create a higher quality report than you are today utilizing Cognos FSR. And a lot of that comes down to simply time. You'll be able to further harness team insights through a multi-author environment. You'll be able to guarantee consistency of data through integration with a single source of the truth, and deliver the latest information through real-time updates. Now, getting back to some of the report outputs, the idea is that we're taking a look at a sample external document here. You can have multiple individuals all working on this document at the exact same time. A number of them could be working and reviewing XBRL. A few of them could be actually doing and performing the XBRL tags. Others may be reviewing the taxonomy itself. Or this could simply be one person or a few persons involved within your organization. The idea is that all participants will be able to do this at the exact same time within our multi-author environment. The output options, extending on some of those which I've already mentioned now, absolutely include XBRL. So you'll be able to build and preview your instance documents, you'll be able to generate those instance documents, and they are ready to file if you would like to self-file. You're also then going to be able to create outputs, which I have not mentioned, in Adobe PDF, utilize Adobe InDesign for higher glossy type annual report outputs. You'll be able to output to HTML format, as well as be able to output with all the appropriate and required eggrization formats so that you can file, once again, in a self-filing manner. Now, Cognos FSR reduces the risk throughout the entire process. Through the close, consolidate, and report phase, there are a number of risks associated with the process. Now, some of these risks include just risks of errors. So right now, a large degree of rekeying of data takes place. There's not always consistency across the report as a result, and numbers may not always be tying out. With Cognos FSR, all of those are gone. They are no longer issues because there is tight integration to your source data. There is the concept of labels or variables in text to promote consistency and dynamically change all places of a number or of a date of your organization name, all at the exact same time by simply having to change it in one place. And there's validation rules that will confirm for you that all of those numbers and all of those changes have accurately been changed. A risk of late filing, typically what we see is a large degree of time spent on reapplying formatting, rolling forward a report manually, picking up and literally moving over columns of data, and rekeying a large volume of data as well. Well, with Cognos FSR, you'll be able to use your prior reports as a template for the next period. We'll automatically load in your new data, as well as automatically load in your XBRL tags. Risk of insider leaks, not present everywhere, and thankfully so. But the idea here is that Cognos FSR will provide you an opportunity to secure your report. You'll be able to provide security around the view and the edit rights of each area or each page of your report if you would like to, perhaps a section of the report. And workflow controls will be able to assist you in creating those access points and overall managing the process. And then finally, risk of non-compliance. This of course does touch home and will hit XBRL, but the idea here is you can put the controls and procedures in place to be better equipped to handle XBRL, whether you're just entering in your phase of the mandate and requirements, or whether you're looking to address some areas of contention essentially that you may have found while dealing with XBRL already. So let's take a look just very briefly at XBRL and what some of the first wave requirements are. And one of those year one requirements is around block tagging. So this is where you're going to need to apply a block tag around each and every financial note that you have. And these are typically notes that are notes for your financial statements. Secondarily, as you progress, that block tag is going to be extended into multiple data points. So you will have to roll forward and bring forward your block tags. Also create block tags for any new and additional financial notes that you may have in future reporting periods. But now you're also going to have one additional tag for each accounting policy found within that note, along with a tag, for each note or each amount, whether it be monetary, a percent, a number. And so the tagging and the volume of tags will substantially increase. Normally this means a longer time would be needed, or a longer window, a longer runway for you, should be needed. Here are some tagging volume estimates, and this came directly from the SEC's website. We estimate that Southern Company would be required to tag approximately 6,800 data elements on the Form 10-K. That came from their Comptroller and Chief Accounting Officer. Here's another from First Energy, their VP Controller and Chief Accounting Officer. We anticipate approximately 5,400 data elements would be required to be tagged, requiring a significant number of extensions to the standard XBRL taxonomies. And we're going to discuss what these extensions and what the taxonomies bring and what they mean to you as well here as we move forward. Finally, here's one from Intercorporation. We estimate that performing detailed footnote tagging would result in approximately 2,500 tagged elements compared to approximately 500 tags required to meet the year one requirements. So quite typically what we see is as an estimate anywhere from 5 to 10 times the volume of tags that you may have in your year one compared with your year two and moving forward filings. So oftentimes this does create additional headaches. This creates additional work for yourself and additional work for those that are actually outsourcing, are looking at outsourcing, or perhaps already are, to your financial printer as an example. This is also where you're going to find your time is even going to be further reduced when you're looking at outsourcing this type of information. And we're going to discuss some of the pros and some of the cons as well as we move through. So let's take a look at the actual window. So here what we can see is that the external reporting and XBRL timelines that you're dealing with typically include your financial consolidations, your external reporting process, and then your SEC filings. And for very much so, you've been able to manage to that filing deadline. Now with the SEC's mandate, that deadline has shrunk, or the window has shrunk specifically. And very much so, this has shrunk with an outsourced XBRL option, as well as by utilizing any bolt-on solutions which are not integrated and not part of your actual external reporting process. So this would be a disadvantage by either outsourcing and or utilizing a tool that is not tightly integrated with your external reporting process. Now, adding on to the fact that you're going to have an increase of tags anywhere from 5 to 10 times within estimates, the idea is that there is so much other work to be done, but yet little time to actually make all of that happen. So the risk of late filing and the risk of errors increases. Now with IBM's Cognos FSR integrated XBRL solution, tagging is much more efficient. The deadline and the window is much more available for you to see the end. Now, we do have Tag One's technology, which makes future reporting even faster as well. This is going to lead to reduced risk of late filing and reduced risk of errors overall. Plus the fact we're going to be able to automate the overall external reporting process so timelines can be further reduced. Again, you're creating additional breathing room here for yourself, lowering anxiety as part of the process, and allowing your attention to be turned to the actual report rather than the mechanical efforts that need to take place, and sometimes in very large volumes, as it relates to the XBRL tagging process and the external reporting process in general. Now let's take a quick look at IBM Cognos FSR versus some of the other SaaS vendors that are out there. Specifically, some of them are bolt-on solutions. Others appear to do a fraction of what IBM Cognos FSR can do. So let's first take a look at IBM Cognos FSR. It's a proven product. Analysts say FSR is the most deployed and proven product for financial statement production. It's a mature product with 4+ years of development and being on the market. Over 350 XBRL submissions, and over 145 of them have been detailed level 4 tag submissions. This number every quarter continues to increase. Obviously a very stable company. IBM just celebrated its centennial anniversary, its 100th year, and the company continues to grow and continues to shine and invest in new and exciting technologies. Financial data remains safe and safely in-house utilizing Cognos FSR. Your financial data is not sent outside of the company. There's a high user adoption with Microsoft Office used as a base, and you're able to link back directly to your source data. You're not copying and pasting information, and you're going to see some of the benefits of that throughout the reporting process as well as for XBRL. Now when it comes to some of the other SaaS vendors, they really are unproven products. There's little, if any, analyst recognition, and they're very typically immature products. They're also very small companies quite often, and more often than not. There is a risk of financial data leaks. Financial data is sent outside the company four walls, the company firewalls. It's sent out and broadcast over the internet essentially. User adoption is quite uncertain. Sometimes use of Google apps or similar apps are used, and these are not normally used by most businesses. So what does that do? That leads to a higher learning curve and a longer learning curve for these applications. And copy and paste in itself of data creates higher risks of errors overall. Now additionally here, some of Cognos FSR and XBRL leadership highlights around the product itself is that it was first to offer XBRL Tag Once capabilities. We are also the first vendor to offer integrated taxonomy editing capabilities. The only major vendor with 0 EFM errors for the first level 4 SEC XBRL submission period. And note that all filers since that first level 4 XBRL submission period have filed and continued to file with 0 EFM errors. There are regular briefings with the SEC staff. FASB has licensed FSR to help manage the XBRL taxonomy project, and IBM Cognos is an active member within the XBRL community. We also have a staff part of IBM Cognos that can assist you, very similar to perhaps the assistance that you've been receiving from your financial printers or filing agents, perhaps even your auditors. There's a full staff of very educated XBRL individuals that are XBRL experts. Perhaps some of them are CPAs, CAs, etc. They are well versed in XBRL, and they are there to help you and support you as you look to perhaps bring this process in-house with Cognos FSR. Now Cognos FSR really is the market-leading integrated XBRL solution. And as mentioned, there are other bolt-on solutions out there that do address a portion of the external reporting process. But Cognos FSR is the truly market-leading integrated XBRL solution that really immerses itself within the complete external reporting process. It gives you many advanced XBRL capabilities and many capabilities around the external reporting process in itself, specifically dealing with automation and providing you additional time to meet the requirements and meet the mandate accurately every single time. Now, it's one thing for me to continue to talk about all the benefits specifically that IBM Cognos FSR can bring and compare it to outsourcing XBRL or bolt-on solutions. But the idea is that it's nice to see that leading analysts in this space are also recognizing the beliefs and the position that IBM Cognos FSR is able to put our clients and to put clients who choose to adopt our technology specifically. So here Gartner said back in 2009 around outsourced XBRL that the work for the initial tagging requirements could perhaps be in the hundreds of disclosure elements in the first phase. However, given the ramp up of XBRL requirements, this could be very quickly into the thousands of disclosure elements within future phases. So these organizations may find themselves at a disadvantage because they have outsourced their XBRL capabilities and have not built up expertise in the application and use of XBRL. Now, adding to that fact, with outsourced XBRL, there is a higher risk of late filing. You are not in complete control of your timeline any longer. In fact, quite traditionally, there's actually an additional pencils down period that is imposed upon your organization. There's a greater difficulty in dealing with last-minute changes as a result, and without IBM Cognos FSR Tag 1's capability, there's a higher risk of errors, and with higher penalties due to increasing liability at the same time. Now, outsourcing costs will become prohibitive with detailed tagging. Outsourced providers will have difficulty servicing clients with detailed tagging as well. So now it's time for the actual product demonstration of IBM Cognos FSR. And just a quick reminder, you do have a live chat panel box there. You can send questions directly to myself and comments for that matter as well. What I'm going to do is reserve some time at the end of the product demonstration, quickly consolidate and scan through the questions and comments that have been coming through and get you answers for those questions. So let's take a look at the actual application now. So for some of you, this might be your first look at Cognos FSR. And what I've gone ahead and done is actually selected a report, which happens to be a 10K in this example. And as soon as you select any report for that matter, you're going to see a similar home screen based upon your security profile and who you are as a user. Now up top here, what will be very similar right across all users will be the fact that you'll be able to see exactly what team you belong to, what perhaps document that you're working on right now as a team and collectively. And you're also going to be able to have some high-level visibility into how many days you have left in order to complete your submission or to meet your deadline internally for that matter. Over here on the right-hand side to help you better manage that process is the workflow engine that is built into Cognos FSR. This is an area where you can keep track of all the different tasks, all the different individuals, all the different groups that are working on their respective areas, pages, or sections for that matter, as it relates to your documents that you're putting into Cognos FSR. Now down below here, I've just highlighted here for you that a few different sections and pages, really just notes for that matter, that are going to have an exercise of XBRL tagging take place. Notice here though, just to the left of that, that end users to perform that task are actually going to be utilizing Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Word that are already going to be on your desktop. So what you're going to find is that Cognos FSR acts as a wrapper and an application framework around your existing tools that you're already familiar with. It makes the process for XBRL tagging and taxonomy management that much more straightforward and easy to do. Now over on the left-hand side, there's a number of different file formats that you're going to be able to produce, and some of those are going to be your EDGAR filings, some of those are going to be your instance documents, and you're going to be able to preview that information. You're going to be able to log directly right onto EDGAR and submit and self-file that information, and it's literally at a push of a button which output and which format you require, but Cognos FSR can deliver all of those formats that you actually require. Now thinking in terms of XBRL, just very quickly, there perhaps will be, for certain users that have XBRL responsibilities, this additional file menu for themselves. Whereas they'll be able to configure XBRL, which means we're going to associate your taxonomy, whether it be the base taxonomy, whether it be a pre-existing taxonomy that you're going to import into Cognos FSR, or it's one you're going to have to build from scratch. The idea is that we will associate your taxonomy, or taxonomies as it may be, with the application itself. You're going to be able to cache all of those taxonomies and use them as version control for your taxonomies and for the preparation of them and of the actual tagging exercises you go through. As I quickly mentioned, you are able to preview your instance document, you're able to build and generate your instance document and files, and at the same time, you're going to be able to run reports to view all tagging that has taken place. You're going to be able to also see other additional information, which I'll get into a little bit later on, around the presentation of information, such as inline XBRL outputs, as well as making sure that you're conforming to all EFM validation rules and that your instance and taxonomy files are accurate and compliant. So all of this is right inside the actual application. There is no additional third-party software that you actually need to purchase to utilize with Cognos FSR. Now if we expand out this information here over to the left-hand side, I'm just going to actually see or expose out the tree, and in this case here I've chosen to break down my report very, very granular. Around XBRL and the exercise, you simply might choose to have this at a much more summary level, where you might have all of your notes requiring XBRL tags, you might have your balance sheet information, your income statement, cash flow, etc. in one section, and you might have all other remaining areas that simply do not require XBRL tagging removed or hidden for that matter from plain sight and view as you're moving through your XBRL tagging and taxonomy management exercises. Now, some of the outputs that I was mentioning beforehand literally are at a push of a button, and what you're able to then furthermore do is generate your instance document files. Again, this type of file is just that XML code that is required, that does get submitted. However, it doesn't provide much color or context for that matter for actual internal review. Where you're better off served with is actually utilizing either the SEC's previewer, where you can log on to this website specifically, and you can directly submit your information, and you're able to furthermore then preview what your filing would look like without actually doing an official filing. So this is an area where you can validate your information before you're actually moving through the submission process. There are additional other viewers out there as well. By all means, you could utilize those too. Now in the case of actually submitting your file, Cognos FSR will generate all of the required files you need, and you'll be able to very easily move over to the Edgar website. You'll be able to log on with your pertinent information, and you'll be able to self-file should you choose to want to do that. If you still have a third party that's assisting with the actual filings themselves, then you could continue on doing that, and you would just simply pass the files over to them, which would have come from Cognos FSR. If you would like ourselves to do it, meaning the IBM Cognos family, we could also specifically assist you in that filing. So you have a lot of options essentially. Now, one of the additional options here that Cognos FSR does provide for you in terms of output, making that instance document look a little bit more colorful, literally, as you'll see here in a moment, but also just providing better insight, especially for reviews, whether they be senior level individuals who simply don't want to navigate through a document or want to see how their report actually looks very similar to their Edgar filing, very similar to a Word draft perhaps. This is an HTML format, which is actually XHTML format, which embeds the XBRL tags directly inside the HTML file itself. So this is an example where I can choose to highlight all of my tags, or some of them for that matter. I can hover over different areas of the document, and I can very quickly see all the information as it pertains, even things like parenthetical tagging or my footnotes, the number of shares, etc., all as it relates. And so as a senior level review person, or just as a person reviewing the document, it definitely makes that review process a lot easier, let's say. So just again, a couple high-level overviews and options there for you. Let's actually now turn our attention to how you would utilize the tagging application and how you would utilize the tagging concepts inside of Cognos FSR. So the first thing I'm just going to do is go down to where your first year requirement specifically would be for some of you. which is tagging the front side of your financials, as well as obviously the footnotes. But this is information that would need to carry forward regardless of whether it's your first filing, your second, third, fourth, etc. You do absolutely have to have this information tagged at all times. And there's going to be some benefits of doing it inside Cognos FSR, as you're going to see here in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to enable my XBRL. So as part of my toolbar, and as you're starting to see the application framework wrap around Excel, I also have the ability to interact with XBRL functionality right from the same window. I don't have to log in and out or go to a different application specifically. It's going to load up just as I would need it to, and as I would probably expect and want it to for that matter. So here's an example then. As I load up XBRL, I can take a look at basically the statement of financial position as part of my presentation link base, and I can quickly get to that information and see that all of my line items in this case are exact to all of my line items within my Excel area. Now what I can furthermore do is I can notice here that a lot of this information has already been tagged in blue, or perhaps it's coming through a little bit of a gray color for you today. The idea is that I can highlight all that information, and up top here in my middle pane I can see exactly all of those tags specifically as it relates to my document in this case. So I can see all of the values for all of the different time periods, all of the different locations for both 2010, 2011, and in this case 2009. So the idea here is that this quickly can summarize for me all of my tags that are existent on this worksheet. So all of the tags are actually held in the centralized repository that is part of Cognos FSR. Now if I wanted to simply remove one of these tags here, I'll select marketable securities as an example, and I can remove that tag. And let's assume that this is a new line item, and I will actually create a new line item with you live here just in a moment. You'll be able to see that, and I'll sort of do it completely from the ground up. But for the time being, let's just assume that I had a new value, that I either had to replace a tag or that I wanted to, I just needed a tag for the very first time for that matter. So what I could do is I could navigate over here to the left-hand side of my screen. I would find all of my elements that I have as part of either the base taxonomy or as part of my extended taxonomy. And what I can now do is actually just say, well, let's go ahead and assign that value or that area with this tag. And it's key here to note that regardless of what value is actually sitting there, the value could be 25,000, the value could be 250,000, there may not actually even be a value there. The idea is that the tag will always stay with that cell and with that line item or location, regardless of what the number is and regardless of what that number is finalized at the time of your actual submission itself. So there really truly is a tag once approach with this technology. You tag your financials once, you tag your notes once, the respective line items, etc. And you can literally also roll that information forward to future periods. So you're only doing maintenance tagging in terms of new notes, in terms of new line items, etc. So as we take a look here, one of the other quite often, we'll call it a mistake or an oversight really, is the fact that many values themselves need to have a negated label associated with them. So as part of your taxonomy design, obviously we're going to set up things, and you would set up things, perhaps already do have negated labels created, but some of those values also need to have the negated signage effectively associated to it. So in this case here, it's very easy for us to actually go ahead and do that. It's a simple check, yes or no, is it a negated value or not, and you're able to move forward and, generally speaking, be more ready to actually conform and have less warnings or less errors that you may have had in the past. Now, as I take a look at some additional other information here, what I'm just going to do is pull up our taxonomy manager. I'm going to stay in the same section of this report. So in this case here, when I load up our taxonomy manager, you're going to see effectively a few different taxonomies. So you have the ability here to store multiple different taxonomies in multiple versions of your taxonomy, all part of the tool, so that you can utilize that from an audit trail standpoint, you can utilize that from a go-forward strategy standpoint, and also from a migration standpoint from earlier base taxonomies to current base taxonomies. 08 to 09, 09 to 11, would be a couple examples there for you. Now, an example here specifically is that if I take a look at my 2009 taxonomy, I can go ahead and open that taxonomy up, and we'll start to see the real estate change ever so slightly, where the top pane again will be very specific to my taxonomy, and the left-hand side very much so the same thing. Now, in this case, what I'm expecting to see is that we're actually have part of this already reading in our EFM rules reading as part of the application, the 2011 taxonomy. So what I can look at historically back is that there are or have been specific items that are actually deprecated in this case. Now that would present us with some warnings, with some errors specifically, and the system itself is literally doing real-time checks which can be refreshed, and when I say real-time checks I mean real-time validations for your actual taxonomies themselves. So they're going to give us certain warnings and certain error messages, and the idea here is that certain messages will require us and present us with other options. So this gives us an example of this deprecated item, and it gives us a few options as to what we could replace it with. So whether we want to replace it with one of our extensions, one of the other base elements within the taxonomy, we're going to have basically our hands held and direct us into the appropriate replacement for those exercises as an example. So what I could also furthermore do then is just simply search and say in this case, well, let me go ahead and create a brand new extension or a new element if it was appropriate. Or I could just say, let's go ahead and search or utilize one of the pick list examples we saw a moment ago. And I can simply view the information, view the properties of this area directly inside my taxonomy and say, well, what does this mean? It's reading from the US GAAP element here, telling me exactly what the documentation and what that label happens to be. I can determine that that's the most appropriate, and it's a simple click or double click there, and automatically it replaces that item. I am no longer looking at or having a deprecated item as part of this taxonomy and as part of this relationship group specifically. So what I could now do is also continue to look through other areas specifically where I can see some of my standard labels should correspond to its name. I see some other areas or other warnings around abstract elements. And so they're very helpful items. And another common example would have been around oftentimes an income statement was never set or a balance sheet was never set specifically as part of the taxonomy. These are some of the things that very often have taken you time, especially in an outsourced mode, to be able to review and then wait to get the taxonomy back as a new update, and then you're spending additional time reviewing. If you had the tools available to make those changes with the knowledge right away, which you have the knowledge to do, then you'll be able to do that much more quicker and get these things turned around and really be more so in control of your timelines overall. So I'm just going to actually navigate to a different area now to talk through a different level of tagging, and this would be dimensional based tagging. And so the idea here I'm going to use is the property, plant, and equipment footnote, and once more I'm going to enable XBRL. So in this case here, I can navigate and change my presentation link base to my capital assets area. And I can expose out the information. I can see the detailed line items that would be appropriate and that are part of my taxonomy here today. But I can also furthermore take a look at the dimensionality aspects of the actual tags themselves. So here I can see a detailed tag, and at the same time I can bring up my dimensions, and I can see that the axis itself has actually been tagged as well. So you find an example like this, you find maybe a fair value disclosure footnote as well, gets quite extensive and quite detailed. There are many other examples as well, but the idea here is that this technology supports all levels 1 through 4 and everything in between, obviously, with combinations and with much more advanced tagging than simply your first and second year requirements. There's always going to be a little bit more advanced level tagging than quite oftentimes you hear about. Now, as an example goes, or as just continuing on through here as well, I'm just going to take a look at my inventory area. So we've taken a look at 2 examples within Excel, but quite oftentimes other tools out there only allow you to tag specifically either in Excel or in Word. And quite oftentimes you have to wait for your final report to actually be completed. With Cognos FSR, that is not the case. you are able to begin your tagging exercise much further downstream or upstream, whichever way you want to look at that. And the idea here, as I change my link base once more, to be able to expose out and be able to see a couple things here with you. This is Excel again, as I've pointed out, but I'm just going to highlight all of my information once again. And so with those highlights here, we can see once again everything is neatly organized, quite visible in that top pane. And we can organize that information by element, by location in Excel, by time period, the unit, the scale, etc. Now, quite oftentimes what actually does happen is that your balance sheet will change, your notes will change, and the line items that will correspond will also change. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is insert a new example or a new line item, just as I would in Excel. And I'm going to call this new other inventory as an example here. So the idea here is that I now would like to or need to put that within my taxonomy, as well as make the appropriate label, create the proper element for it, etc., and make it available so that I can apply tags to the future values that will appear here within this table. So I'm going to commit those changes. I'm just going to save that information in terms of having the line item there. That would create an audit trail, a record of those changes actually taking place by user with a date stamp, a time stamp, etc. And now what I'm actually going to do is talk through a little bit more of our taxonomy management as we look to incorporate that line item in our taxonomy here. So the idea that I can actually go through is actually to say, well, we do support multiple different taxonomies, and you will actually go through a migration process that will likely have you utilize your 2009 taxonomy and move that forward to 2011 as an example. You may have had your taxonomy created by your financial printer or with some outside assistance as an example. We'll be able to literally import in that taxonomy and then do the migration for you should that actually be required. So what you end up with is you'll end up with probably a middle tier or an additional version of your taxonomy which will actually be part of the migration. So in this case here, you'll be able to select what your period is, and you'll be able to only build your new updated extension or base taxonomy here with the US GAAP 2011, if that's the only option essentially at the point in time of you utilizing this software. Now the idea here is that afterwards, once you do that, you can imagine that you will still have some warnings, some areas, whether they be deprecated items, whether they be label issues, etc., that will be present with the later version of the taxonomy and with the base extensions themselves. So the idea here is that after going through and correcting those issues and performing a little bit of maintenance, you would be able to then utilize and have a 2011 taxonomy essentially, and perform all of your additional tagging. And this is where I'm just going to go ahead and open up that taxonomy, and I'm going to be able to, in this case, add on that additional new line item to my taxonomy, make it available as an additional element, and actually then utilize and do all the XBRL tagging still inside Cognos FSR. So the idea here, keep in mind again, is there are not additional tools. Everything I am doing is Excel-centric, is Word-centric, which I will show you just in a little bit as well. And once again, there's a wrapper around those existing tools. So the learning curve with this application is very, very minimal. It's literally measured in hours due to the fact that you really are the experts of your information already. You understand your files themselves. And in this case here, as I take a look at my relationship group, I can navigate down and I can find the area of my inventory note detail, and I'll be able to expose out what I currently have existent within my tree. Now, what I would likely want to do is lock that information out. So now I have control of this area of the taxonomy, and you may have someone else who's in the taxonomy doing similar maintenance tasks as well. But I'm going to go ahead and actually add on a new child here, and it's automatically going to pull forward from my Excel spreadsheet this new line item. And in this case here, I'm going to search for other inventory. Now you can call your elements anything you like as you create an extension or need to for that matter. I'm just going to simply search US GAAP elements right now from the base taxonomy. And here it brings up some examples, and once again I'm able to show the properties of this information. I can quickly hover over and read what the actual documentation label happens to be, and I can determine whether this is the appropriate element that I would like to utilize for tagging purposes here. So let's assume that I have determined that exactly is what I would like. I can once again just double click on that line item, and it's automatically going to add that in on the left hand side of my tree here. It's automatically going to bring over and pull over my label, and I'm going to leave this check mark checked here, which means any future changes to my Excel line item when the time comes when I no longer have an actual item called new other inventory perhaps, it will automatically update the label and actually update the taxonomy and the base element, including all of the tags that may have had the old naming convention as I move through the actual tagging process as well. So this is a significant time savings compared to utilizing an outsourced model, as well as just being able to be in complete control, as I've mentioned a few times, of your own timeline specifically. So in this case here, I'm actually going to generate that taxonomy file. This will remind me, and this will check back in any relationship groups that I may have checked out, which obviously I had just here. And the idea is that now the system will not only save my taxonomy, it's going to save it to the central repository, it's going to update the database area, it's also going to run through its own generation and validation checks at the same time too. So I will get a few confirmations here, one telling me that the taxonomy has been saved, and the second is going to tell me that my taxonomy has no errors, or at least I'm expecting it to tell me that it has no errors. At that time, once it is error-free, I would be able to move forward and continue on with my tagging exercise. So as you can see, it is very easy to be able to manage the taxonomy itself, and there are other tools that make this look, very much so quite similar. I wouldn't and don't believe they're as easy to utilize. But at the same time, there is a control process that you would want to put around this, meaning you will only want to have certain users be able to generate and update the database and actually save these types of files, just from a version control standpoint and from a process flow standpoint. So rather than having anyone be able to get access to it, which certain tools unfortunately act that way, you have the ability here to more so put process and control around the taxonomy management portion. So again, there's a few things here that have taken place as well. When I selected over here on the left hand side of my tree a US GAAP element, automatically the system is smart enough and is going to lock us out from making certain mistakes. It will actually refrain myself from making any changes to the balance or the period type, the type in general. And the reason for that is because they've already been explicitly defined with those characteristics in the base taxonomy. If I were to choose an extension or create an extension, and here we just see that my confirmation message is successful with no errors, and my taxonomy is valid, and the generation has been completed. Now, when we do create a base, an extension to the base elements, you will have an option and obviously a need to be able to change this information. So there's definitely things that drive you and drive the end user in certain directions to make it so you are not making mistakes in the actual process itself. Now, I'm going to return back over here to the same object. I'm going to enable now my XBRL. I'll call up my new updated version from the repository that is now my 2011 taxonomy, or the slight update to that taxonomy, and I'm expecting to see here that I now have an available option, an element, which I never had before, called New Other Inventory. And I'll be able to find that in my presentation area, and here it is down below. So that is great for me. It's very quick. Here it has the default time period specifically, and I'm able to then move over whether there's a value there or not, and begin to tag, as we saw earlier on, my information with that cell. And it here tells me, well, there's my other inventory, here's my display area, the time period, the unit, and the scale, etc. So very quickly I've been able to make a small change. The idea here is that this would be an example of some of the ongoing maintenance that you would move forward to and move through in terms of utilizing the technology for future reporting periods. Now keep in mind, however, though, we are going to be able to update and pre-tag all of your other areas though for you. So in this case, when I choose to roll forward this report, all of my column headers and values would literally be picked up and moved over, and all of these tags would stay in place, updating the corresponding time frame, however. So we will pre-tag literally your complete and entire report for you. It now just simply becomes a very one-off maintenance exercise that you would be going through. But again, you have complete control of when you're doing that, the beginning of your process, midstream, at the end, combinations of all of those specifically. So I'm just going to exit out of this area here for a moment, and I did mention that other tools out there will only allow you to do and perform tagging either in Excel environments and or only in Word environments. With Cognos FSR, you have the best of both worlds. So in this case here, I can move over to that inventory area. I can highlight once again my XBRL area. I'm already in my inventory node area where I want to be. And I'm able to quickly as well, even in Word, highlight all of my tags that I have. So in this case here, I see I have my disclosure text block tag. I can navigate to the next one, and I can see I have more so of a detailed note tag here at the same time. And this is an example of one of our label variables, which make for a more efficient tagging process as well. Whereas even when numbers change when they're embedded in narrative, in paragraphs of information or across different pages, automatically we can tag a location and a label, and that will pick up all those values and all the appropriate tags, once again, regardless of how many changes are actually taking place to the actual numbers themselves. So the idea here is that you can tag in both Word and Excel, and you can tag overall at any point of the process that you would like to choose and that you would choose as part of making your way through your own workflow or your own report compilation, etc. So just taking a look at the time, I realize I'm very close there and pretty much right up against the window here of our time that we have allotted here today. Obviously, I have not been able to get through all of the functionality and the level of detail that you likely do require. But definitely here, I just want to quickly recap a few things with you and then answer some of your questions, and then also talk through some additional steps perhaps that you might want to undertake with ourselves. So the idea here is that, again, we can tell you all the great things about the product all day long, but the idea is that it's really great when the analysts come out with recommendations, and once again do state that IBM Cognos FSR is the market leader in terms of XBRL and report automation. So they came out with a report even back in 2009 that stated these are some of their critical recommendations. And in this case here, some of the ones I've highlighted with you today were around integration to source data with real-time feeds of information, multi-author environments with collaboration, all the XBRL capabilities to be able to generate, validate, manage your taxonomies and complete all of your tagging requirements, have the workflow and the audit trails along with security, have a process monitoring dashboard, along with many other output options that you can have as part and parcel of the overall solution too. Now, some of the overall core business benefits of Cognos FSR are around reducing risks, reducing personnel costs, reducing audit costs in many instances, with and from a lot of the features that are inherent with Cognos FSR. Now, additional ones might be around reduced cycle time. I referred to it as you being in complete control of your timelines a number of times today, as well as improving your overall business insight. And once again, we can say many great things about the tool, but here are some real-world examples from some of our clients talking around 4 of those key areas, which is reducing personnel costs. We've created and filed our 10Q already with IBM Cognos FSR, and it really reduced our workloads. Another one around lowering external costs, and specifically to do with XBRL. Much more cost effective than outsourcing the tagging and formatting to a printer, especially when it comes time for the detailed tagging of footnotes to our filings. Other examples are around reducing risk and reducing cycle time as well. So greater control, version control, workflow and audit trail capabilities, and just simply the ability to quickly turn around additional reports, whether they be XBRL or other, in a very timely manner. So it's a nice surprise to be able to use FSR for report automation, when sometimes the initial focus might be simply on XBRL and XBRL tagging.